In this video, I'm going out and about to one of my favorite creeks. I could be just doing a walk around. The main thing I want to do is see how things have changed since some of the big rains that we've had over the last little while, see what's been moved around. But I might get the pans out and see how we go. G'day, welcome to 𝗦𝗿𝗵𝗶𝗴 Prospecting. My name is 𝗤𝘃𝗂𝗏. Now, yes, I have my mask. We are in stage 3 restrictions here, so I'm allowed out and about, but I've got to have the mask with me. Actually, if there was anyone around here, I'd have to have the mask on, but there's not. I heard a motorbike before, but other than that, I'm by myself. But anyway, let's get down in the creek and see what's changed. Now, I don't think I remember that stump being there. I think that's been thrown down from somewhere upstream, and this bar here looks new. I remember it being more of a trench like this, further into this corner, and these rocks were more exposed. So yeah, that could be something interesting to investigate. And this all looks like a pretty fresh dump onto this bedrock, but this area I know gets hit pretty hard because it's such an obvious place to look. So, you know, every man and his dog looks there, especially all those people who follow the low pressure model. That's a decent stone to pick up. Very little work that needs to be done to that one. Now, it's probably hard to see what's going on here because the four-wheel drivers have it's all been churned up, so it's all a bit turned over. But if you look closely, there's a line of larger gravels in the center, and that's a good indication of a pay streak. As the water's moving down from side to side, the heavies tend to concentrate in the middle. And so somewhere, you know, just here, there's probably a good line of gold. Now, another reason that I reckon this is a good spot is because the digging would be super easy. I reckon because we've had some pretty recent floods, there'd be gold in this loose stuff on top. Once there's been a few more gentle rains, it'll sink down. But I reckon right now you can get a reasonable amount of gold just out of this. But the other thing that indicates that it's got a pretty good chance of having gold is if you look closely at what is actually sitting in the middle. It's not just the size, but there's all these little bits of magnetite and hematite. And some of them, that's not particularly heavy, but some of them, yeah, quite hefty for their size. So I reckon you could just dig a little trench across to try and find out if there is a pay streak there, identify it, dig another trench further up, and then clean the guts out between the two of them. And possibly that area there, which is looking a bit cleaner because it's not in the path of the four-wheel drive guys, that might be interesting as well, because it's sort of on the back of this rock bar, but also the back of that inside bend. And all this is quite smooth. So I reckon there's a good proportion of gold would go all the way around that bend, would completely miss this section and end up just there actually. So actually this top section of this straight section is probably going to be the best bit. So I reckon I'd start just about there. But that's a fairly big operation. So what I tend to do when I'm working in this creek is I wait for when it's actually raining, because as soon as it stops raining, it just dries out. The flow disappears to nothing really quickly. The ground around here has got almost no vegetative material. The ground doesn't absorb the water really at all. It's all just very, hard packed clay. So it just runs off, it gets into these gullies and goes. And so as soon as it stops raining, the flow diminishes really quickly. So if you want to run a sluice here or even a high banker, you've got to get out basically as it's raining or you've got no water. So for that reason, I spend most of my time working this creek when it is dry, and there I can dry classify. Now that means I'm going to be missing a reasonable amount of the fine gold that is in this, because it's very hard to get it off the rocks. It pretty much sticks to the rocks. And the super fine gold, well, I definitely will be losing a lot of that. But you can process a lot of material very quickly, because when this stuff is dry, it goes through the classifiers very easily. So yeah, while that's the best feature I've seen on this walk, not the one I'm going to even think about touching today. Let's find something else. Something close to water so I don't have to go too far with my rocks. I've just found something really, really rare. It's water. I wonder how deep it is. Not very. Yeah, so I think we'll try and find somewhere to pan, somewhere elsewhere to pan. Well, I've decided on a spot and I've had a little bit of a dig. I've got two samples, which basically is one pan of dirt, which I've then put in a bucket. And I'll show you what I got here out of the hole. So what I got here is relatively loose stuff on top, and as I was saying before, there's a reasonable chance there could be some gold in that, because it won't have had a chance to settle down. But then further down, we've got down to this 𝗏𝗃 layer. Now, if I was really processing this spot, I'd dig through this, because you can see here where my shovel has scratched it. This is actually a mineralized layer that's on its way to being conglomerate, and often that has really good gold in it, especially when you get down to the mudstone which is underneath it. But, you know, I've only got the two buckets, so I can't really dig any further. I'm going to be, well, I won't have samples, I'll just have a lot of dirt to process. But what I've done is I've dug down into this, and then, you know, sort of, I'm going to clean this up a bit better, so that if there was any fresh gold that's come through this stuff, it'll be sitting here, and then I'll have it in my sample. Now, just to give you a bit of perspective where my hole is, it's towards the outside of this bend, and there's a reason why I've done that, which I'll be going into in another video. But I'm also going to take a sample that is more towards where the people traditional sailor dig, which is the inside bend. So I'm going to grab a pan full of this lot here. A few months of lockdown and I've lost a lot of fitness. I'm puffed. Barely did anything. So I left the buckets back at a spot up there which is close to the road, and I'll go get the car, but I thought I'd show you the area that we're working in away from the erosion gully. And when the old timers first came to this area, what they found was at the bottom of this gully this sort of silted up layer. The bottom of the gully was covered in, you know, essentially a fine clay. And then they dug down through that until they got to the very old ancient, you know, riverbed, where it was chockers with gravel, and if they were lucky, had a decent amount of gold. Once they got to that, they would dig through that, you know, gravel layer to get to the bedrock, or in many cases around here it was kind of a false, well, no, it's actually a bedrock. It's a mudstone, so if it's wet you can put your shovel through it, but it is a kind of stone. It's just a very soft stone. They would dig down to that, and then they would mushroom out the sides of their shaft as much as they felt they could get away with, and then they would stop, they'd come back up, and they'd go over a few meters and do it again. So a lot of the gold that we get out of that creek is stuff that they've missed, and this whole ground is covered in gold, but it's very, very dilute. It's just, you know, not much here at all. But once it's been eroded out of the gully, out of the sides of the gully, out of the walls of the gully, it gets concentrated again, and you can get a reasonable amount of pay. And of course then there's other treasures that you can find which sometimes are worth more than the gold you find. For example, I've just found someone's scoop. So yeah, there's about, I don't know, $5, $10, and just near where I parked the van. Yeah, well, the sun's getting low, and it's time to get back to just up the road where I left the buckets and go home, and I'll have something to do in the morning, pan them out. Well, I'll spare you the suspense of what was in those pans, because I got fly specks, barely visible fly specks. Even with the macro lens, it would have been hard to see. Now, the main thing I was looking for there was there a difference between the 3 different samples, and there was no discernible difference as far as I could make out. Now, I know this creek produces gold all the way along its length. At some point across its width, there will be gold every single foot of it. The challenge is working out where across its width the gold is falling. Those two, and the 2 holes that I dug, I wasn't on it. So that bend requires a little bit more investigation and sampling. But the spot I'm really tempted to go back to is that straight that I was talking about earlier in the video. But like I said, it's a big job, and to deal with that big job, I think there's a piece of kit that I've been had in the back of my mind I want to build to get it done. So stay tuned for that build video, and stay tuned for my next trip back to the Whipstick, where I'll be going to that spot. In the meantime, if you want to pop over to Chestnut Nag, you can see how I turned that piece of slate that I grabbed into a pretty decent sharpening stone. Also, if you happen to be interested in Japanese chisels, I'm currently organising a group order, and you can check out the details and find that on Chestnut Nag. In the meantime, have fun, enjoy the reduced restrictions that we now have, and if I don't see you out in the forest, I'll see you in the comments. Catch you later. Bye-bye. Don't get me. I think it's even longer since you've done this.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm feeling a bit out of practice.
Were you in practice ever?
Not really.
You've always just got to take it over when it's just kind of I get down to the last bit.
Yeah, that's the best bit.
All right. Okay. Yeah, the exciting bit. No pickers.
No, there's no pickers. I'm not even seeing any. Is there maybe some tiny flower gold?
Keep going. You've still got a heap of material there.
Yeah, but oh.
You're not seeing anything.
Oh, only tiny flower gold.
And that doesn't interest you, does it?
No.
You want the chunky stuff.
Yeah.
You want the stuff that you can like pick up and wear or something.
Yeah, that'd be nice. You haven't bought me home any of those yet, though.
Not that you can. Well, I've got 1 or 2 you could wear.
Yeah, maybe if someone had a magnifying glass. Or maybe not quite that bad. They can't point at it from a distance. They have to come right over.
There's several pieces. I've found a whole bunch of like gram pieces and half gram pieces. You can make beads out of those if you wanted to.